On this Tuesday night, Facebook under investigation. Canada's privacy commissioner wants to know if your personal information was misused by a British political data company. Tonight, the CEO of Cambridge Analytica is suspended. The company's office is searched by British authorities. This as there are new questions about the company's involvement in Donald Trump's presidential campaign. And pressure is mounting on the Facebook CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, to speak out. From London to Washington to Ottawa, we're following all the angles on this story.
Also tonight, as the Saudi crown prince travels the world promoting a progressive kingdom, does reality match the image?
And police find more bombs in Austin, Texas, as they try to track down the mastermind behind them. This is The National.
Cambridge Analytica calls itself a political consultancy, but tonight it looks more like a mercenary, using activities like data mining and the reported misuse of millions of people's Facebook data. Nala Ayed begins our coverage of this growing scandal tonight and its growing implications.
A world away from its self-congratulations after Donald Trump's win, Cambridge Analytica now sits in the eye of a different storm. CEO suspended, office is quiet. Its potential undoing has been months in the making. An ongoing investigation by the UK's Information Commissioner, a Canadian, now resorting to a warrant because the company is uncooperative.
Because I think there's been so many contradictory statements, what we really need to do on behalf of the UK public, on behalf of US citizens, is to go in and look at the data and gather the evidence for ourselves as the independent regulator.
At the time, Cambridge Analytica said it was proud of its integral part in this win. And though it now denies it, it appears that part was fundamental.
Have you met Mr. Trump?
Many times.
You have?
We did all the research, all the data, all the analytics, all the targeting. We ran all the digital campaign, the television campaign, and our data informed all the strategy.
And the brand was defeat crooked Hillary. You remember, of course.
Right down to one of Trump's favorite slogans.
Crooked Hillary Clinton. You know, that term is really stuck.
You don't have access to data that is
also disturbing, the possibility ongoing investigations here have been misled. The information MPs have heard, now overtaken by what journalism uncovers. The committee chair is now demanding Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg come personally.
I think it's in the tech company's interest now to act to save themselves, and the first thing they could do would be to speak out, put themselves in public forum where they can answer questions and be challenged on what they're doing.
At issue here, not only the privacy concerns of millions and whether laws can catch up to technology, but also the prospect of foreign or Russian meddling in votes.
Now, the worst possible scenario is if a bad country, like Russia, teams up with a bad company that is misusing personal data to target these dark social ads in a way that spread division, spread hatred, and ultimately bend the course of a free and fair election.
Concern both here and the US and many places beyond. Nala Ayed, CBC News, London.
A key investor and strategist in Cambridge Analytica is a man whose name you may not recognize, but he wields a lot of power. Reclusive American billionaire Robert Mercer is a key figure behind U.S. President Donald Trump's election win. He and his daughter Rebecca are deeply involved in conservative causes and have tremendous resources to fuel them. They include the far-right Breitbart News, formerly run by their protege, Steve Bannon, but it's not just about his money. Well, Keith Bogue is watching this story for us from Washington. You've studied Robert Mercer for a long time, Keith, so tell us who he is and how he plays into all of this.
Well, I think people are beginning to understand that he's a billionaire who has an interest in politics, but really what he is a computer scientist. That is his passion. And years ago, when he was working at IBM, he began developing data algorithms and statistical frameworks to solve human problems. For instance, at IBM, he was working on language translation programs. But he came to realize that information, his frameworks, his data analysis could be applied to other things, and so he went to work for a hedge fund. And that's how he made his fortune. His private hedge fund using innovative techniques of data analysis, was generating annualized returns of 80% a year. Extraordinary. And I mention that because I think it's important to understand how good he is at what he does, how good he is at analyzing data, and now he's turned his talents, his innovation, his pioneering spirit towards politics.
So that background distinguishes him from some other conservative U.S. billionaires, but beyond that, a lot of people would be thinking about the Koch brothers, for example, in terms of their support of the Republicans. How does Mercer differ?
Well, he's extreme right-wing. I would say he's more right-wing than the Koch brothers are. He's put a lot of money into developing alt-right outlets. For instance, he put $10 million into Breitbart. And, you know, a lot of his politics are about making government smaller. He would like government to be as small as possible. But he's also been accused of some severe and extreme racial views. He does, for instance, believe there's no such thing as racism in America except for the racism of African Americans. He thinks African Americans were better off before the Civil Rights Act. And to the extent that there is any racism among white people now, he thinks, well, that's really no concern of the government at all. So extreme politics indeed.
All right, Keith, thank you.
Thank you, Ian.
Of course, the other big part in this story is Facebook and why it didn't inform the public about Cambridge Analytica's access to 50 million profiles.
Yeah, that's right, Ian. All this allegedly happened without most users knowing or consenting to any of it. Now, for its part, Cambridge Analytica insists it did nothing wrong, and Facebook says it's changed rules in response. But as Briar Stewart tells us, for officials in Canada and the U.S., that's not good enough.
It's very serious with what Facebook has done.
I think Mr. Zuckerberg has built a massive empire without being accountable.
I hope we'll hear from all of those social media platforms, including Mr. Zuckerberg.
There was no shortage of calls today for Facebook executives to come forward and explain just what happens to all of our data. But for a company that's built around sharing things publicly, today it was noticeably silent. Online, some use the hashtag #Where'sZuck to highlight the fact that CEO Mark Zuckerberg hasn't said or posted anything since the controversy broke. Facebook announced it's conducting an audit while legislators are seeking their own answers.
We need to know whether the private information, the personal information of Canadian citizens has been compromised.
The federal government is asking this country's spy services to look into how private data is being handled. And the Privacy Commissioner has launched an investigation into Facebook. Its stock sank again today amid reports that the U.S. Federal Trade Commission is also investigating the company.
When people learn about our research, they find it shocking in terms of what can be done.
Konstantin Beznazov has studied Facebook security in the past. Even though the company has made changes in recent years to restrict data collection, he says privacy is not Facebook's primary goal.
They're motivated to get money from the data, so that's where their efforts are. How to make sure that whatever data they have, they can sell it.
While it's under scrutiny now, he says the pressure on Facebook has been building for some time.
We're not able to see beyond the activity we see on the platform.
Last year, Facebook was one of the tech companies hauled before U.S. intelligence committees over fake news and Russian interference in the election.
We are not going to go away, gentlemen. And this is a very big deal.
And that's the message U.S. lawmakers will send again, as congressional staff are scheduled to be briefed by Facebook tomorrow. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Vancouver.
So there's good reason to want to know where Facebook's data goes, because if you're one of its 2.2 billion active users, Facebook has a staggering amount of detailed information on you, and information is power. The moment you sign up for Facebook, the company logs everything you give it. Your addresses, your credit cards, your hobbies, political views, universities or companies you've been associated with, and all cross-referenced with those of your friends. Ever noticed how eerily helpful the people you may know suggestions can be? Well, that's why. Facebook tracks every reaction to every post, every profile, pic, song, or video you've searched for, looked at, or been tagged in. From your pattern of activity, it can know when you've been sleeping, when you're likely awake, and it certainly knows when you've been lurking on your colleague's or ex-boyfriend's profile. And it goes deeper than that. Anytime you log into an app, say Spotify, Tinder, or Uber, and you use your Facebook login, that app can get loads of data too. Back in 2014, Facebook even gave apps access to their users' friends. That's how Cambridge Analytica allegedly managed to get a hold of data on 50 million people. Facebook has since changed that policy, but still, how does all that data get used? Well, advertisers, for example, can take it to model your personality and behavior and manipulate it, or in marketing jargon, engage it. To get an idea of how powerful this can be, in one massive peer-reviewed study that reached 3.5 million people, researchers used a single Facebook like to predict their personality types and put them in categories based on how extroverted they might be or whether they'd be open to new experiences. Then, by targeting the right ad to the right personality, they boosted clicks by up to 40% and purchases by up to 50%. So think about it. If that's the effect from just one like on Facebook, imagine what companies could do with the hundreds of data points most users provide without even knowing it. It is hard to fathom all of that. But Adrian, let's move on now to a royal visit in the U.S. that's being watched pretty closely here in Canada.
You bet. Andrew, Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman markets himself as the new progressive face of Saudi Arabia, but there are some darker chapters in his story. He met with the U.S. president at the White House today in one of the first stops on a wide-ranging tour of the U.S. designed to polish his image and forge new economic ties. As Ellen Morrow reports, many people have issues with things the prince has done. Donald Trump doesn't seem to be one of them.
If you look in terms of dollars, $3 billion, $533 million.
It's not every day you see props in the Oval Office.
That's peanuts for you. Should have increased it.
But President Trump used them to highlight billions in U.S. military equipment sales to Saudi Arabia. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman by his side.
That's why we are here today, to be sure that we've taken all the opportunities and achieve it, and also get rid of all the threats facing our both countries and the whole world.
The Washington stop is part of a 3-week sales and seduction campaign across the U.S. for the Saudi prince, trying to sell himself as a progressive leader of an evolving country. Bin Salman needs to diversify the Saudi economy beyond oil, part of a strategy he calls Vision 2030.
He'll likely be king someday.
Brian Katulis has interviewed Bin Salman several times.
In his mind, I think he fundamentally wants to change not only the way the Saudi economy runs, but all sorts of rules touching social life, religious life.
Bin Salman has been behind several reforms, including the decision to allow women to drive. But he's also been called a war criminal over Saudi Arabia's military action in Yemen, which has led to one of the world's worst humanitarian crises.
And with that, I'll take your questions.
Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked if Trump addressed the conflict.
I'm not aware that that came up specifically.
When President Trump visited Saudi Arabia on his first international trip in office, he said it was not his job to lecture other countries.
He's tried to reduce what was a trust gap that emerged between the United States and Saudi Arabia under President Obama. That's a good thing. I think what's not good is that Trump is not willing to use any of U.S. leverage to shape Saudi actions on things like the war in Yemen.
$13 billion.
Instead, the president focusing on what he claims to know best, business. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Washington.
The prince is touring the U.S. for 3 weeks. His agenda reads like a who's who of U.S. business. Bin Salman will meet with executives at the New York Stock Exchange. Saudi oil giant Aramco is rumored to be going public. He will talk about nuclear power with General Electric in Boston and oil with industry heavyweights in Houston. In Silicon Valley, he's meeting with Apple's Tim Cook and execs from Facebook, Google, and Uber. In Seattle, it's Amazon's Jeff Bezos and Microsoft founder Bill Gates. And finally, he will stop in L.A. to talk about boosting the film business in Saudi Arabia. Bin Salman lifted a ban on movie theaters just a few months ago. So a word, or quite a few words, will be said into the ear of the Crown Prince about Raif Badawi, arguably one of the world's most prominent, most talked about political prisoners, with 6 years of demonstrations on his behalf around the world. He has been jailed in Saudi Arabia since 2012 for writing of a more moderate nation. Badawi is not Canadian, but his family lives here, as do his defenders, who sense this might be their moment. They've never met the blogger Raif Badawi, and he's never even been to Canada. But for 168 Fridays in a row, the persistent protesters of Sherbrooke, Quebec, have stood under his beaming banner to plead for his freedom from a Saudi jail.
And the only thing we can do in Sherbrooke, us people, ordinary, is do this on Friday.
We hope it's making a difference.
Among them, effectively leading them, Badawi's wife Ensaf, who settled in Sherbrooke as a refugee with her kids 5 years ago. She and they have become the darlings of Quebec politicians.
Mes enfants adaptés les gens ici, les villes Sherbrooke, puis c'est ma ville maintenant.
The force of Badawi's story is the motivator. The young man last seen on grainy footage being lashed, 50 at first, then sentenced to 1,000 of them and 10 years in jail. And here's the horrible irony. Badawi was arrested for promoting a more modern Saudi Arabia with more liberties for women. And yet that's the very transformation Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is traveling the world boasting about. So why is Badawi still in jail? That question stalks the Crown Prince.
As the Saudi Crown Prince sweeps across Westminster in Whitehall, will she pledge to raise a very specific case concerning the jailed writer Raif Badawi?
Raised in the British Parliament and in private with the British Prime Minister 2 weeks ago,
It's an honor to have the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia with us.
Badawi's case is being raised right now in Washington. The strategy is to bring up the case so often, so forcefully, that the Crown Prince almost needs to release Badawi just to change the conversation. You say you know. Former Justice Minister Erwin Cotler is one of Badawi's defenders.
I've met with people who will be meeting with him, and the case will be brought up. There's no question about it.
Is there any support for this within the White House itself?
I believe there may be support within the White House itself.
And a hint of news. Word that Badawi might be on a list of those eligible to be released, a sort of gift from the royal family. That's the kind of suggestion that is jet fuel for a family whose only connection to Badawi, aside from his face everywhere, is in brief moments when he can call from jail.
Everybody really happy. I want to speak with him. Give me the telephone.
Everybody's trying to talk to him.
Yeah. I want to show him my house, my school. I want to show him the hockey, play with him hockey.
Wants that still need to wait, but maybe not for long. So this is a bit odd for Canada. Raif Badawi is not a Canadian citizen, so that ties Canada's hands a bit. The Saudis have said through back channels that Canada should maybe stay out of it. But both Erwin Cotler and Badawi's wife really think the Prime Minister should be making a personal appeal. And then if he's released, it's not guaranteed he'll come to Canada, but you can bet his family will surely want that.
The scope of the bombing attacks in Texas is growing tonight. Police now say they believe the person responsible is getting bolder and more violent. Authorities found 2 suspicious packages at 2 different FedEx depots, one of which exploded. That one went off early this morning at a sorting facility in Schertz, Texas, about an hour's drive south of Austin. An employee was hurt.
A package had been traveling along the automated conveyor when it had exploded.
It's the latest in a string of explosions whose targets, methods of delivery, and levels of sophistication seem to keep changing. But federal agents believe the culprit is the same in all cases, and they're asking each of the city's 1 million people to be vigilant.
If you have a package that was not expected, if you are suspicious of the return address, do not touch it, do not move it, but contact 911.
But how do you guard against a bomb maker whose tactics keep changing? Sometimes they're mailed, sometimes hand-delivered, quietly left on doorsteps. The 4th explosion this weekend was triggered by tripwire. So far, 2 people have died and 4 people have been hurt. At least 500 agents and investigators are on the ground working on this growing mystery and racing against the possibility of another attack.
We have our national response team here. We got canine explosive detection canines here. We have intel research specialists. We're working hand in hand with our FBI partners, state and local partners.
And just to give you a sense of how on edge people in Austin are, this was the police response to yet another explosion late tonight at a Goodwill store in Austin. You can imagine the conclusions people jumped to right away, but police say it was not a package bomb like the others, and it doesn't seem related.
It didn't look heavily damaged.
Well, still to come on The National. Southern California is on a collision course with a massive storm. Tens of thousands of residents have been told to get out.
The world's last male northern rhino is gone, but not all hope for his species.
And stashing your stuff. We go behind the booming business of storage.
Everything from airline seats to condos are getting smaller. As people continue to live their lives and accumulate things that they cherish, they just need places to put them.
On The National tonight, exclusive video of an emergency on board a WestJet flight. The plane took off this afternoon from Vancouver and was about to land in Nanaimo, BC, when the cabin started filling with smoke. When the plane landed, an emergency evacuation was ordered. The U.S. Northeast is bracing tonight for its fourth nor'easter in less than a month. The snow has already started, but tomorrow it's likely to get a lot worse, with some areas expecting more than 30 centimeters of snow. Thousands of flights have reportedly been canceled. And in Southern California tonight, thousands of people are out of their homes and on edge as a monster storm makes landfall. It's expected to be the worst of the season, and the big fear is that it could trigger more devastating mudslides. We've got CBC meteorologist Johanna Wagstaff keeping an eye on the storm for us tonight, joins us now. So, Joe, what exactly are you watching for here?
Well, Andrew, this storm, or atmospheric river, as we call it, is really just getting started tonight for Southern California. Let me show you the stream of moisture on our satellite and radar that's barreling towards Southern California, sort of like the end of a fire hose. This is why we have flash flood warnings and watches in place in addition to the evacuations. It's not just the rainfall totals we're worried about, it's the rainfall rates coming down at 15 to 20 millimeters per hour. That's enough to trigger debris flows and flash flooding, and those rates are actually higher than what we saw with the deadly mudslides back in January. The heaviest of the rainfall is expected to fall over the next 48 hours before the storm eases Thursday night. But again, these are the same areas hit by the wildfires, and it's that burn scar land that is most susceptible to the flash flooding, Andrew.
Okay, Johanna Wagstaff, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Some other stories we're following tonight on The National. What's behind the boom in the business of storage?
And in Russia, a culture of entrenched misogyny keeps the Me Too movement at bay, but some women are still winning small victories.
When I saw the reaction of Mr. Slutsky to the anonymous reports, when he was in Facebook trying to, make a joke about it, it made me just crazy.
Here in North America, the Me Too movement has taken off like wildfire. Some women finding the courage to confront their abusers, some men coming to terms with their own bad behavior. Over in Russia, though, it's a very different story. Many men and women are asking, what's the big deal? And late-night comedians have openly mocked the movement. But as Chris Brown reports, that isn't stopping a few from standing up and saying, me too.
Few Russian women have put their careers on the line like Daria Zhuk. In a country where sexually harassing women is often the butt of jokes, she's daring to push for change.
It's a very big problem, yes, of course. All my friends, I mean women and girls, they faced it.
She works at TV Rain, an independent, liberal-leaning station in Moscow. 4 years ago, during an interview, she met powerful Russian parliamentarian Leonid Slutsky.
трогать, целовать.
His behavior became defiant, indecent. He tried to touch me. He tried to kiss me. It happened right away when he entered the studio.
Ну что ж, Леонид Эдуардович, придется выходить из тени.
Spurred on by what was happening with Me Too elsewhere, last month, Zhuk went public with the harassment, using her own program to speak out. That encouraged 3 other women to come forward with their own stories of Slutsky leching on them.
Приветствую, это новости на канале RTVI.
Ekaterina Kotrakatsa, who now works for a Russian-language station in New York City, says Slutsky tried to kiss her during an interview 7 years ago.
Me too. He just pulled me to the wall and tried to kiss me and tried to touch me, and I was astonished.
Not only did Slutsky deny it, the Speaker of Russia's Duma said the women should have quit their jobs if they didn't like the attention. Another MP said Slutsky was only guilty of not sharing the women.
When I saw the reaction of Mr. Slutsky to the anonymous reports, when he was in Facebook trying to, make a joke about it, it made me just crazy.
Harvey Weinstein. Russian state TV tends to portray Me Too as a Western phenomena, not relevant here because of Russia's social superiority. But after another woman, BBC producer Farida Rustamova, claims Slutsky asked her to be his mistress, the calls for his resignation grew louder. Finally, he posted this on Facebook. Sorry to those of you I've caused any discomfort, consciously or unconsciously.
I really think that this is a huge step for the Russian civil society, and no one has ever did this before.
The Ethics Committee of the Duma finally agreed to look into the complaints. Daria Zhuk will appear and tell her story on Wednesday. At worst, Slutsky's penalty may only be a reprimand, but given the continuing hostility, Zhuk says it still amounts to a modest Me Too moment for Russia. Chris Brown, CBC News, Moscow.
So we'll have to wait to see how the Duma responds to the complaints, but its track record on women's rights is not good. Last year, it went so far as to decriminalize some forms of domestic violence. So now if a man hits his wife or child less than twice a year and doesn't break any bones, the most he could get is 15 days in jail or a fine of about 655 Canadian dollars.
Here in Canada, the federal government has introduced new firearms legislation, promising it's not a reincarnation of the old long gun registry.
This is not a registry, and there is no element of a long gun registry contained in this legislation.
Bill C-71 will instead require retailers to keep records of all sales, which many already do, for 20 years. They'll only be accessible to police with a judicial warrant. Individuals who sell a weapon privately will be exempt from keeping sales records. The bill also expands existing background checks for licenses, assessing a person's entire life for potential red flags like mental health, addiction issues, and domestic violence records. That is up from the current background check of 5 years. A rare subspecies of rhino is close to total extinction after losing its very last male. Sudan was 45, that's about 90 in human years, and an infected back leg left him in great pain, unable to support his own weight. Yesterday at a Kenyan wildlife preserve, his keepers made the difficult decision to put him down.
The death of Sudan actually shows that clearly, that if we don't take care of what we have, we will definitely continue to lose it.
As the last hope for the northern white rhino, every effort was made to help him reproduce. Conservationists even gave him a Tinder profile, a cheeky way to raise money to develop in vitro fertilization for rhinos. I don't mean to be too forward, it read, but the fate of my species literally depends on me. 6 foot tall and 5,000 pounds, if it matters. But nothing worked.
We use bananas to hide the bills inside hills.
So these bananas contain pain relievers?
Yes.
Last week, painkillers and antibiotics seemed to give Sudan a new lease on life.
But as we look at it now, he is an animal that is showing the will to live. He is strong. He is eating properly.
But the rebound was short-lived. As he sank into greater distress, he was kept under constant guard against the poachers who helped drive his kind to the brink.
It's a very sad thing to lose Sudan because then it shows clearly the extent of human greed.
The sole survivors are a daughter and granddaughter, neither a good candidate to carry his offspring, but there is still hope that Sudan's preserved semen can fertilize eggs from those females, which would then be brought to term in a surrogate southern white rhino. It's never been tried before, but the story may not be over yet.
And lots more still ahead on tonight's National. Coming up, not your grandma's garden. We'll show you how frigid Churchill has become fertile ground.
The secret sauce is in how we support farmers and how we make it easy for them to get started and at a small scale.
Right now, it feels fairly significant. It's a fresh food. It's fresher than probably anything that Churchill has really ever been experienced with in the past. I literally pick it today, and you get it later today.
In Canada's north, eating healthy can be expensive and hard. Imagine paying $11 for a jug of milk or $9 for a head of broccoli. And produce is often weeks old and wilted by the time it gets there. But a new project in Churchill, Manitoba might just be the fix for that, or at least the start of one. We sent Cameron McIntosh to check it out.
Churchill's northern store doesn't usually look like this.
Isn't that wonderful?
Stocked with leafy, green, and fresh produce. Excuse customers for getting emotional.
Oh.
Produce here is usually flown in, driving up prices as freshness and nutritional value diminish. Locally grown is a foreign concept.
Great endeavor. Basil even.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's like, wow.
Here in the north, there have always been two big problems when it comes to growing fresh food on a commercial scale. The growing season is just too short, and the terrain just isn't suitable to it. So here in Churchill, the fix they're trying is in that shipping crate. And it even works on a day like today when it feels like minus 45.
So this is it.
This is it.
Looks like lettuce.
Yeah, we got some fluffy leaf lettuce.
This is called the Grocer, a portable hydroponic garden.
Nice basil growing here, smells delicious.
That basil, along with lettuce, arugula, are all growing under LED lights in nutrient-enriched water, computer-controlled for maximum growth.
All you need is a hydro hookup and a source of water. This is the seedling nursery.
Carly Basler is the operator and now town gardener.
We are growing about 400 to 450 units of produce that we can harvest weekly and make those available in our community. Regardless of rail service or air service or weather, it is a lush green garden in the middle of winter, so that's pretty unique.
She's calling it Rocket Greens, a play on the slang for arugula and the former rocket range where the research center that bought the unit is located.
We'll pull one of these kales out.
It's limited to leafy greens. It can't grow root vegetables like potatoes, but it is changing diets here.
This is the pak choi. It's cookable and it's quickly becoming a favorite of people in town. We've been sharing how to cook it, and people are frying it, putting it in stews.
Goes well with caribou, you said?
It can, yeah.
Others have tried greenhouses and hydroponics in the north before. What makes this different is it's designed to work on a commercial scale for profit. This is the first one in Canada. There's 6 others in Alaska and plans to go into other Canadian communities.
We really think that there's no reason why every community shouldn't be growing their own food locally if they can.
Ottawa-based Grocer helped develop the technology. It sells the units at an upfront cost of $210,000, then offers technical support.
The secret sauce is in how we support farmers and how we make it easy for them to get started and at a small scale.
Okay, so here's a seedling.
The Churchill Northern Research Center bought this one to research food security. But this is quickly turning into a real business. It's already considering buying another.
All right, let's get it inside before it gets too cold.
Basler is selling to the local grocery store and a couple restaurants. She also started Launchbox, a weekly subscription and delivery service.
It's just remarkable that we can get this up here.
A big hit in what may be the one place where you don't need to argue with kids to eat their veggies.
This little one ate two heads of lettuce.
Actually, 3 had to last in total, and I had to go buy more.
I've been looking for a little bit of meaning in my work, and I've sort of found it here. Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome.
Making the Great White North
We'll see you guys all next week, I guess.
a little greener. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Churchill.
And this couldn't come at a better time for Churchill. The rail line Cam mentioned, the one that delivers food to the north, it hasn't been running for almost a year. Parts of the track were washed out last spring, and it's the only rail link connecting Churchill with the rest of the country. The owner of that line could fix it, but they say it would be too expensive, and they'd rather just sell the whole thing off. So for now, anything fresh has to be flown in, which drives up prices even further. Various levels of government do run programs to help bring costs down, but that only takes people so far.
As Canadians load up on record household debt, something else is growing: the amount of stuff people need to cram into their homes. Diane Buckner found a business that is soaring like never before, all because people have so many things.
Steve Creighton and his company are on the move.
Sit on the right.
Diamond Storage is based in Ottawa, but this is Toronto, where Diamond plans to open 80, yes, 80 new locations in and around the city.
It's a very big facility.
Coming soon, this location, the largest such facility in the country. 9 acres, 500,000 square feet. It will include a wine storage area for collectors, complete with a lounge and a sommelier.
We're very confident there's a lot of people looking for, reliable storage solutions for their stuff. There really aren't a lot right now. So, we feel we're going to fill this at a very, very fast pace.
Creighton isn't the only one who sees big money in storage. Just up the road, a new startup called Second Closet. No lockers here, just a warehouse, and all booking is done online.
One of our team members or teams will come and pick up your stuff and bring it to storage. And then you can just click on things when you need them back, and we'll deliver them back on a date and time that you schedule.
Founder Mark Ang is just 22 years old, but has lined up some big investors, 5 trucks and hundreds of customers.
Everything from airline seats to condos are getting smaller. As people continue to live their lives and accumulate things that they cherish, they just need places to put them.
So you guys can just start with these boxes here.
Corinne Berry is using Second Closet for the first time. Her landlord is selling, and she hasn't found a new place. She's moving in with a friend temporarily.
I was hoping to have found something before today, but here we are, and my stuff and my life is going to storage.
Insiders say demand is driven by the 6 Ds: divorce, death, dislocation, downsizing, disaster, and density, meaning more people living in smaller spaces. There are plenty of good reasons to use storage, but there's one reason that people in the storage business don't seem to mention all that often, and that's the fact that a lot of Canadians just have too much stuff. Garages, basements, and closets are bursting at the seams, and not just in Canada.
We are all suffocating from too much stuff, and the reason for that is very simple. We live in this wonderful consumer-driven, materialistic world of capitalism that's incredibly successful.
British author and futurist James Wallman says it used to be that humans struggled to get enough stuff, like food and shelter, in order to survive.
Things were expensive and scarce, and now suddenly, because of the Industrial Revolution, mass production, and then the Consumer Revolution, things are plentiful and cheap, and so we are using the same mental tools that were honed over hundreds of thousands of years that said, get stuff, keep stuff, because it's going to go soon.
He believes the boom in the storage business shows that instinct has run amok. Storage is even bigger business in the U.S. There's even a hit reality show, Storage Wars. America, with its strong consumer culture, has 9 square feet of storage per capita. In Canada, it's only 2 feet, and some say that's not enough.
So historically, we've been underserved by the metrics that they have in the U.S. on the amount of product. This site would have approximately 500 units.
Stephen Scott runs the only Canadian storage company listed on the stock exchange, Storage Vault. In just 2 years, the company has gone from 10 facilities to 149 by buying up smaller companies all across the country, spending over $800 million. What do you think about that some of the demand for storage is just because we all have way too much stuff?
Well, we do, and Amazon and Costco and the likes of those businesses are making it even easier and cheaper to buy more stuff.
Do you have too much stuff?
I have more units than I'd care to admit.
You mean you're storing your stuff here?
I think that we have 4 units.
Your family?
My family has 4 units.
Wine storage is going to be in the middle of the building, a whole new concept of wine storage and wine lounge and sommelier.
No question, the self-storage industry is getting creative with high-end services like the sommelier at Diamond. New modern designs where the units are hidden inside a condo and retail development. Along with online pickups and delivery, this business isn't as boring as it once was, even if some people see another solution altogether.
But genuinely, if you've got so much stuff in your life that you can't fit it in your own home, and you want to pay someone to look after it for you, I mean, just get rid of that stuff.
Diane Buckner, CBC News, Toronto.
There is, as always, a catch to self-storage. If you don't keep up the payments, your stuff could be up for grabs. It has happened to some famous people. Aretha Franklin put much of her onstage wardrobe into storage in 2002 after a fire in her Michigan home, and then the Queen of Soul seemed to lose interest. In 2011, the contents were put up for auction. Former movie star Burt Reynolds lost out on a locker full of memorabilia, including a canoe from his film Deliverance, but a group of fans bid on the contents, then opened a museum in his name, but it's closed.
Just as we go to break, we want to show you a preview of a story that Rosemary Barton will have for us tomorrow. What does it take to be a teenage activist? Here's an excerpt from The Water Walker.
Autumn Peltier is just 13. And in most ways, just like any other teenager, she texts a lot. She giggles, she hangs with her friends, and she makes slime with her sister. But she's also a little bit exceptional. Almost without expecting it, she has become a visible activist for safe drinking water and clean waterways for Indigenous peoples. Do you realize how big a deal it is?
Yeah.
What you're about to do?
Mm-hmm. Because this is bigger than basically everything I've ever done.
As Pyeongchang 2018 comes to a close, the Olympic journey continues.
And look at the time, 9:69.
One network is there.
Kylie Marsh for 21-year-old Canadian, a new world record.
Every step of the way to Tokyo 2020 and beyond. CBC, Canada's Olympic network. The Junos are coming to CBC with performances by Arcade Fire, Arkells, Bare Naked Ladies with Stephen Page, Daniel Caesar, Diana Krall, Jesse Reyes, Lights, and more. Plus a special tribute to Gord Downey, the 2018 Juno Awards, hosted by Michael Bublé, live from Vancouver, Sunday on CBC, home of the Junos.
Tonight on The National, police are running out of options and finding a missing 10-year-old boy in Montreal. They've called off their underwater search, and they're admitting they just have no idea where Ariel Jeffrey Kouakou might be. He disappeared more than a week ago. His parents believe he was kidnapped, but police haven't found a single clue. There is a $100,000 reward if anyone can help find him safe and sound. You're looking at the fallout from a nerve agent attack on British soil. Today, 23 Russian diplomats and their families boarded buses and left London for Moscow. They were ordered out by British Prime Minister Theresa May. She's accused Russia of being behind the attack on a former spy and his daughter. Russia has denied any involvement, and in return, last weekend, they ordered 23 British diplomats to leave Moscow.
Just turn the box wall up and break now.
And of course, he's best known as Ringo Starr, but today the former Beatles drummer became Sir Richard Starkey after being knighted at Buckingham Palace. Bestowing the honor was Prince William, and it's been a long time coming. The only other surviving Beatle, Paul McCartney, received the honor more than 20 years ago in 1997.
It is rare for Canadian Olympians to get much attention in the United States, but it's not surprising to see how Tessa Virtue and Scott Moyer's fame has extended beyond our borders. To a Canadian song, by the way, the skating duo dancing their way onto the Ellen DeGeneres show, where the talk show host asked what may be the question on everyone's mind, and that is our moment of the day.
I mean, are you a couple? And I know you're saying you're not dating, but we want to find out for sure, so we're going to see how well you know each other in a game we're calling the Definitely Not Dating Game. Tessa, what is Scott's favorite TV show?
The Office.
It is The Office.
We're so competitive at this.
I know. All right. Scott, if Tessa is getting hangry, what food should you give her?
Oh, chocolate.
Oh, I said breakfast.
Oh.
Anything breakfast.
All right.
Okay, so apparently they actually did quite well on that game at the end of it. She didn't know whether he wore boxers or briefs. Okay. The most curious thing for me, I have to say, I have to know what the internal dialogue is. Every time they're asked this question, is it driving them completely bonkers? Because they, they handle it with such good cheer, but you got to know it makes them crazy.
Yeah, you've got to imagine that they're getting a little tired of it. I will say, I mean, to the credit of the Ellen Show, one realization that I had watching that appearance was how much fun it is to watch Virtue and Moyer dance on solid ground. Of course, their skills are transferable, but for some reason, my mind just never put them in that setting, and it's kind of fun.
I wonder if there are any grumpy people watching right now saying, on the National, you're talking about those guys and whether they're a couple or not, what's the news coming to? But you know what?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, we are. And so, Adrian, let me put you on the spot. Are they a couple or not?
I don't think so.
The other thing I'm curious about from a business standpoint is whether they're going to be able to parlay all of this fame and all of this charm into commercial success south of the border. As you guys know, when it comes to Olympics, people, they want their heroes, their stars, right? So we'll see what happens. This is a burning question. We have to address it again tomorrow night. That is the National for March 20th. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.